The Galactic Scientific Symposium was held on Raltec 4, a glittering ecumenopolis where the greatest minds in the galaxy convened. Beings from every corner of the known universe filled the halls, their myriad forms reflecting in the gleaming walls of the Grand Assembly. Hushed voices murmured in a dozen languages as anticipation crackled in the air like a plasma storm. Today was special. Today, the finest intellects in the universe would bear witness to something unprecedented, something that had baffled their most accomplished scholars, and, some whispered, threatened to undermine the very foundations of their knowledge. It began innocuously, as these things often did. A data transmission had arrived from the human sector, accompanied by an official request for evaluation. Humanity had been admitted to the Galactic Union only a few short years ago, and their contributions had been regarded with wary interest. They were a race of contradictions, reckless yet calculating, chaotic yet impossibly efficient. The Union had expected them to be warriors, having emerged from a world categorized as a Deathworld, a planet so hostile that even the most resilient species found its conditions unlivable. What they had not anticipated, however, was the sheer unpredictability of their intellect. Dr. Velmari 9 Talk, a senior member of the Raltec Scientific Assembly, reviewed the submission with mild amusement. It was an academic request, nothing too unusual, pertaining to an equation. A rudimentary one at that. X plus 3 is equal to 7. Her mandibles twitched in irritation. It was a joke, surely. Some sort of misplaced transmission. She had expected an advanced treatise on hyperdimensional physics, not primary school arithmetic. The document attached was a compendium of explanations, each more baffling than the last. The humans, it seemed, had proposed something utterly preposterous, that this equation, simple as it was, could be solved. Not approximated. Not redefined. But solved definitively. The message had been forwarded to several of the most prestigious research institutions in the galaxy, each more perplexed than the last. Even the Vienari Mathematic Council, renowned for their computational prowess, had failed to make sense of the submission. Thus, it was with no small degree of curiosity that the symposium was called to order. Dr. Velmari presided over the proceedings, her 8 eyes flicking across the assembly. Among them were representatives from the Kessari probability theorists, the Hungrel collective computation nexus, and even a rare appearance from a Xythian abstract thinker, whose species rarely interacted with the wider universe unless sufficiently intrigued. In the center of the room, a single figure stood, a human professor by the name of Elias Grayson. Clad in an unassuming suit, he seemed an odd choice for such a momentous event. He looked around at the gathered minds, his expression somewhere between amusement and exasperation. Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed non-binary beings of the assembly, Grayson began, his voice carrying an air of practiced patience. I understand that this equation has caused confusion. I'm here to provide some clarity. There was a ripple of uneasy murmuring. The Vienari representative, an elongated crystalline entity whose form shimmered in hues of green and gold, gestured impatiently. We have analyzed the notation extensively. It appears to suggest a direct resolution of the unknown variable. But such a concept is illogical. The value of x is not relative. It is absolute. How can such a thing exist? Grayson nodded. It's called algebra. A basic mathematical principle taught to human children as young as 7. A stunned silence followed. 7. A concept this incomprehensible was taught to pre-adolescents. Dr. Velmari clicked her mandibles. You claim this can be solved with certainty? That x holds a definitive, immutable value. Yes, Grayson said simply, picking up a marker and turning to the massive holodisplay. He scrawled out the equation in crisp, confident strokes. X plus 3 is equal to 7. With practiced ease, he subtracted 3 from both sides. X equals 4. It was as if he had detonated a reality-shattering bomb in the room. The Xythian abstract thinker shrieked, its gelatinous form rippling in chaotic undulations. The Vienari's luminescence flickered violently in distress. A Kessari mathematician clutched its appendages to its cranial ridges as if warding off an existential crisis. Even Dr. Velmari, composed as she prided herself on being, felt her consciousness reel at the sheer audacity of it. But one of the Hungrel representatives choked out, its mechanical voice betraying the depth of its incredulity. To assume a single, definitive solution is to deny the very nature of the universe. Probability. Chaos. The infinite interpretations of reality. Grayson shrugged. Or maybe, sometimes, things just have an answer. The symposium dissolved into chaos. Beings that had spent their lives unraveling the deepest mysteries of the cosmos found themselves utterly undone by the idea that something could simply be. That in a universe of uncertainties, a human child could glance at a problem and declare, without hesitation, a singular truth. Dr. Velmari exhaled deeply, clicking her mandibles in frustration. She knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same again. The human had broken the galaxy's greatest minds. And worst of all, he didn't even seem surprised. The aftermath of the symposium was nothing short of cataclysmic. Across the galaxy, mathematicians, physicists, and philosophers debated, argued, and, in some cases, entirely unraveled as they attempted to comprehend the implications of the human method of problem-solving. Whole departments of academia devoted themselves to what the media had taken to calling the equation crisis. Dr. Velmari Ninetalk sat in her office, staring at the recorded footage of Elias Grayson's presentation. The simplicity of his method was what disturbed her most. The human had acted as if he had revealed nothing of consequence, yet his demonstration had shaken the intellectual bedrock of the universe. A sharp chime interrupted her thoughts. She flicked a mandible irritably before answering the call. A holographic projection of high mathematician Drelquan flickered into existence before her. The elder Viennari's crystalline form dimmed with distress. Dr. Velmari, we need to discuss the ramifications immediately. Several institutions have declared a state of emergency. The Kesari Theoretical Council has outright collapsed, members have abandoned their post. Some have even renounced mathematics entirely. Velmari exhaled slowly, folding two of her arms across her thorax. I expected a reaction, but this is unprecedented. The fundamental principle of galactic academia is that reality is mutable, that variables are undefined and ever-changing. Humans, they see reality as solvable. Defined. Drelquan nodded gravely. We must respond. Already, factions are forming. The Hungrel Computation Nexus has issued a formal protest against humanity's inclusion in the scientific community. They claim such thinking is dangerous, an oversimplification of existence itself. Velmari resisted the urge to click her mandibles in irritation. Then we must reconvene the symposium. We must speak to Grayson and his colleagues, understand more about their methodologies. Drelquan hesitated, his form flickering with uncertainty. That may not be wise. Humans, they are unpredictable. The more we seek to understand, the more they confound us. Already, there are rumors that they possess even greater mathematical constructs, theories that could undo centuries of galactic thought. Velmari straightened. Then we have no choice. We must learn from them before we are left behind. Elias Grayson leaned back in his chair, watching as the delegation of esteemed scholars filed into the human research facility on Lunar Base. It was amusing, really. A simple algebraic equation had managed to ignite a crisis in the intellectual elite of the galaxy. I have to admit, he said, tapping his stylus idly against the edge of his tablet, I didn't expect you all to be this affected. Velmari leveled a gaze at him. Your method of absolute resolution is antithetical to everything we understand about existence. You have shattered the perception that all things must remain in flux. Grayson sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, I get it. You operate on a probability-based framework. But humanity has always valued the concept of definitive answers. Our survival depends on it. When we build a bridge, we don't just estimate that it might hold weight. We calculate exactly how much it can withstand before failure. When we cure a disease, we don't rely on statistical probability alone, we isolate the precise pathogen and eliminate it. Drelquan's luminescence dimmed. And you truly believe there is always a singular answer to any given problem? Grayson smirked. Not always. But sometimes, yes. And that's the part you all are struggling with. We live in a universe of uncertainty, But within that, there are moments of absolute truth. X equals 4. That's just how it is. Velmari exhaled sharply. Then we must ask, what else do you know? What other secrets does humanity hold that we are unequipped to grasp? Grayson's expression shifted, his amusement fading into something more calculating. Are you sure you want to know? Because once you start down this path, there's no turning back. The room fell silent. The galaxy had thought itself the pinnacle of knowledge. Now, they weren't so sure. And they were about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole went. Elias Grayson watched the assembled scholars with a measured gaze, his fingers tapping against the surface of the data console. The air in the research facility on Lunar Base had taken on a charged quality, thick with both apprehension and the flickering embers of desperate curiosity. He could see it in their eyes, Velmari 9 Talk's rigid posture, Drelquan's dimmed luminescence, the subtle twitching of appendages and mandibles from the other gathered intellectuals. They had come seeking answers, but they were beginning to suspect they had opened a door that could not be closed. So, Grayson finally said, his voice steady, "You want to know what else we know?" Velmari's mandibles clicked together, a sharp and deliberate sound. This equation, your algebra, is merely the beginning. The implications are vast. We must understand how far this certainty extends. If reality, as we know it, can be broken into definitive answers, then what other assumptions have we built upon a flawed foundation? Drelquan shifted uneasily, his crystalline form refracting the sterile lights of the chamber. There are whispers across the consortium. Factions forming. Some believe this knowledge is dangerous, that it could unravel the very fabric of the sciences we have spent millennia refining. Others see opportunity, an uncharted horizon. Grayson sighed, rubbing his temples. Of course there are factions. That's how paradigm shifts work. But let me make something clear, this isn't magic. It's not some forbidden law that will cause the universe to crumble if you look at it too closely. It's just mathematics. Velmari's eyes narrowed. And yet, your just mathematics has sent our brightest minds spiraling into existential crises. Grayson's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Well, if that's how they're reacting to basic algebra, then they're really going to hate calculus. The silence that followed was deafening. Calculus? Drelquan repeated the word as if it was an invocation of some eldritch horror. Yes, Grayson said, leaning forward, his voice dropping slightly. Algebra is a tool for finding exact values. Calculus is what we use to understand change. It lets us measure the immeasurable, define the infinitely small, predict the movement of celestial bodies down to fractions of a fraction of a second. It's why we can navigate space with pinpoint accuracy, model the trajectory of an asteroid 1,000,000 years in advance. The scholars recoiled, as if struck by some invisible force. You predict the future? Velmari asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grayson exhaled. In a way, yes. Not in the way you're thinking, not prophecy, not mysticism. But through mathematics, through patterns. The entire universe is governed by laws, and we've spent centuries refining the tools to decipher them. The implications rippled through the room like a gravitational wave. If what Grayson said was true, then the chaotic uncertainty that governed the known galaxy wasn't chaos at all, it was simply a pattern they had failed to understand. Drelquan turned to Velmari, his colors shifting wildly. If they can predict change with such accuracy, then what else might they already know? If they have seen the equations that govern the cosmos, could they have already determined our fate? Grayson's expression darkened slightly. That depends. Are you asking if we've solved the equations of fate, or if we've chosen to ignore them? The scholars stiffened. The unspoken words between them grew heavier, their weight pressing against the very fabric of their understanding. The humans had shattered their foundation once before. What if there were more? What if this was just the beginning? Velmari inhaled deeply, steadied herself, then fixed Grayson with a resolute stare. You said before that once we started down this path, there would be no turning back. I believe we have already crossed that threshold. We must know the truth, no matter what it may cost. Grayson held her gaze for a long moment before nodding. All right then. Buckle up. Because we're just getting started. The silence in the research facility was thick, a pregnant pause filled with the weight of possibilities. The gathered scholars, beings of immense intellect and tradition, had spent their lives believing in the ever-shifting nature of the universe. And yet, here they stood, on the precipice of an undeniable truth: humanity had found a way to decipher the chaos, to make the uncertain certain. Dr. Velmari Nine-Talk felt the enormity of the moment pressing against her. She had spent cycles trying to rationalize humanity's seemingly reckless confidence in absolutes. Now, she saw it for what it was: not arrogance, but a different kind of understanding. A species born from a deathworld, forced to find patterns in disorder, had built their civilization not on the acceptance of chaos, but on the will to impose order upon it. Drelquan's voice finally broke the silence. "You said that we could not turn back, and now I understand why. Our foundations are shattered, our beliefs challenged. But what are we to do with this knowledge? If certainty exists, then where do we go from here?" Elias Grayson folded his hands, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. "You don't have to throw away everything you know. What we've shared doesn't invalidate your understanding of the universe, it enhances it. Your models, your probabilities, they still hold value. But now you have a new tool. One that will allow you to see things differently. To not just predict, but to know." Velmari looked at her colleagues, seeing the conflict play out on their faces. Change was terrifying. But it was also necessary. We must integrate this knowledge. Learn from it. There is no shame in evolution. Drelquan flickered with apprehension. And what if we misuse it? If certainty is wielded as a weapon, will we not descend into the rigidity of absolute thought? Grayson sighed, a small smile tugging at his lips. That's always a danger. But certainty isn't the enemy. Certainty without wisdom is. The key is to know when to seek definitive answers and when to embrace the unknown. The room was quiet once more, but this time, the silence felt different, less like an ending, and more like a beginning. Velmari straightened, her resolve settling into place. "Then we must learn from you, as you must learn from us. We cannot allow arrogance to blind us, nor let fear keep us in ignorance. We will move forward. Together." Grayson nodded, relief evident in his stance. "That's all we ever wanted." As the scholars departed, their minds alight with new possibilities, Velmari lingered for a moment. She looked back at Grayson, curiosity still burning within her. "Tell me, Professor, does humanity have a name for this philosophy? This balance between knowing and accepting?" Grayson chuckled. "We call it wisdom." And with that, the doors to a new era of understanding swung wide open. Not with destruction, but with collaboration. Not with fear, but with curiosity. The universe had changed, and with it, so had its brightest minds. The pursuit of knowledge was never about seeking absolute control, it was about learning how to navigate both certainty and uncertainty in harmony. And in that realization, the galaxy took its next great step forward.